Hey everyone, this is Randall, and welcome to the Imperial Minis channel, and welcome to video number 6 in our Season 3 update series. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the Targaryen faction. It's one of my favorite factions. Folks that have seen my channel before know I run them pretty often. It's a faction I really enjoy. And for this video, we're joined by Dennis from the Hits and Crits channel. Dennis, you want to introduce yourself real quick? Because most of our videos so far we've had Chris with us.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, first of all. I'm really excited to be on your channel. Yeah, I'm Dennis. I'm one of the 3 people running Hits and Crits. Chris and I are best friends and have been for a long time, and we've played all kinds of board games. And yeah, I play Targaryens as well. And I guess that's why I'm allowed to be here.
All right, well, welcome. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I know both of us are big Targaryen fans, so I think it'll be a fun conversation.
I'm sure.
And just like our previous videos, we're going to run through attachments, combat units, NCUs, and tactics cards. But we're going to try to just focus our attention on the most important changes that we think will impact the faction, and then just kind of quickly gloss over some of the less impactful ones, so we can just try to focus our time where it's most valuable. So looking at attachments first, the first one we're going to talk about is the Queen of Marine Commander attachment. So Dany, Queen of Marine, she gained the Threaten order, which she didn't have before. So now she has Threaten, which will allow her to give a weakened token to a unit in long range and line of sight on the start of a friendly turn. This I think is a really great addition to her commander card. She already has intimidating presence, and with this is going to help increase her survivability or survivability of another unit around her. So I think this is a really good change for her. What do you think, Dennis? Is Queen of Marine a commander you've taken a lot? Do you see this being pretty impactful for her?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's impactful, and I think Queen of Marine is one of the more popular commanders in Targaryens.
Mm-hmm.
I think rightly so. I think she changes up the playstyle a lot, and that's something that Targaryens are, yeah, famous for or popular for, that the commanders really have a big impact. And I think it's the same here. Plus, Targaryens are notoriously, yeah, have difficulties dishing out condition tokens. So getting
Mm-hmm.
a weakened token in long range with Threaten is a very welcome change for Daenerys, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they do struggle to get condition tokens out there, and I think a couple of things we'll talk about in this video will help improve that somewhat. But yeah, it's definitely a cool change. So we're going to move on now to Jorah plural, because there were many Jorah changes in this patch. And a quick note, so we're going to talk about Jorah, like solo Jorah, a little bit later. But I think, so the other Jorah attachments got some sort of change. And I think maybe part of that change on the part of the developers was because they realized that they committed an assassination on Solo Jorah for the most part. So I think they maybe wanted to increase the chances that Jorah in some other form would see play on the table. So all the Jorah attachments got changed. So we'll talk about a couple of them that you and I think are the most important, and then just kind of quickly gloss over the other one. But we'll start off with Jorah Penitent Betrayer. So this is the Jorah attachment that can only go on Dany's unit. It was previously 1 point, now it's 0 points, which is great. Getting something for free is generally a good thing. So they changed his wording too, but the wording on the attachment really was only changed to just make it abundantly clear that you can use the tokens on the attack that triggers his ability. So really the only change here, substantial changes, that he went from 1 point to 0 points. And again, this is a way to give condition tokens out. It'll only go on the unit that is attacking Daenerys's unit. And yeah, no, unless you're taking Jorah somewhere else, I don't know why you wouldn't take Jorah Penitent Betrayer. The only reason you wouldn't take him is if you're taking one of his other attachments or you're taking solo Jorah. But I think it's great. These 0 points. I don't know. What do you think, Dennis? Any other thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a really good change. These attachments were not taken. Neither this one nor the other infantry attachment were taken. Mainly, of course, because solo Jorah was so popular, and of course you can't have two Jorahs, so they were out. But they were also too expensive, anyways. And now they really shook that up. You're not taking solo Jorah anymore for reasons that we'll get into, and now you are definitely able to take these, and they're useful.
Then moving on to Jorah the Andal. Do you want to talk about this guy, Dennis, and what value you see in Jorah the Andal? Because he went down in points also. He was 2 points and now he's 1 point. What do you think that does for him?
Yeah, as we said before, like all of these attachments are now usable and attractive to put in infantry lists. Martial training is a great order throughout the game, no matter what unit you put that into. Getting rerolls are so important. If you look at the numbers, having rerolls really ups the damage. So that's going to be really helpful. And also stand your ground gives great sustainability to any infantry unit. If you put a unit out there that's supposed to block or just to harass the opponent, then you might have to play aggressive and are prone to be charged by a second unit into the flank. So this takes that away. I think it's really a good change, and there's some units that are interesting to put him in. I think he's interesting in Brazen Beasts, for example, making them 7 points, but still, this is really a strong 1 point infantry attachment now for Targaryens, and I think they were lacking good 1 point attachments, especially infantry.
Yeah, and Brazen Beasts, we'll talk about them a little bit more in a minute. But they're now 5 points, so putting him in there only like brings them back to just 6 points. So and they're a unit that's gonna really hurt if they get flank charged or rear charged. So putting Jorah in there not only amplifies their offensive output but increases their defense. So yeah, I think he's going to see a lot more play in Targaryens going forward for sure.
Yeah.
And there were 2 other attachment changes. We won't really dwell on them too much. Jorah Exiled Knight went down by 1 point, but as far as cav attachments go, I think there's probably better. There's going to always be a better 1 point cav attachment, I think, unless you really want to like stick him into Outriders just for the tactical reposition. But I don't think that's enough to really increase his pick rate. And then Marcelin, this was just kind of an administrative change, really, just to clarify that his unfaltering conviction can't be stripped. So it's an 8 now. Do you have any more thoughts on either of those, Dennis, or is there not too much to say?
I think
Okay.
that's it, and not a lot of impact there. They're not very impact changes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll move on to combat units. So we kind of started talking about Brazen Beast a little bit just a second ago, and they got some big changes. So they benefited from the universal change to motley armaments that we've talked about in a previous video in relation to the Zorus Riders. And then these guys went down from 6 points to 5 points. And you've used them in lists. I haven't even had a chance to put them on the table yet in season 3. So do you want to tell us how you think these guys are looking now in Targ lists?
Well, first of all, they're looking really good because the models are absolutely amazing. I haven't painted them yet, unfortunately.
They're intimidating. They're an intimidating project, I think, to take on. But yeah, they'll look great when they're painted.
Yeah, lots of detail, and yeah, you can do a lot of different color schemes with them, I guess. We'll see. So yeah, I think that the change is great. I bought them when they came out, and from that moment it was clear, and also I guess community consensus that they would stay on the shelf for 6 points.
Hmm.
They would stay on the shelf. I still bought them, and when the update came, I was really happy because those 5 points really make them a good 5 point unit. And Targs don't have a lot of good or helpful or solid 5 point infantry units. They're lacking a bit. Of course, you have the Stormcrows, but yeah, depending on how you count them in-house. So they are a good 5 point unit, I guess, if you count them to be Targaryen. But this is really a good option. You talked about motley armaments. The changes that before you needed to charge the flank or attack the flank or rear to get a benefit out of it. Now you definitely get one of those two options, either the +1 attack or you shut down abilities. And that's great. Plus, you can decide. So if you charge something that really has annoying abilities, especially for that unit, something like Disrupt will make it more difficult for Brazen Beasts to hit. You can shut that down. Golden Company swordsmen, if you charge them before they have used the order, you can shut it down. So that is really helpful, I think, also in the current meta. However, the unit is still really squishy, but they're only 5 points. So, if they get a charge in the flank with all their abilities and rerolls, that is gonna hurt. And if they get another attack, maybe even 3 attacks, they were worth the 5 points, even if they die then, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, well said. And then them going down to 5 points kind of makes it a little easier to think about putting like a 1 point attachment into them to kind of specialize them however you're needing them in your army.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, I think
any attachment you would put into them? What would be a good one?
I mean I really like the idea of putting Jorah the Andal in there. I just think you get them stuck into combat. They're down. They went down from a 3+ to hit to a 4+ to hit now. So you get them stuck into combat. Now you can use martial training to have that second attack or that attack while they're engaged to push more wounds through. And then, like we mentioned a few minutes ago, having stand your ground helps their squishiness a little bit. So yeah, I think Jorah the Andal to me is kind of like the ideal attachment for them, and that puts them at a really good package for 6 points, I think. All right, so we'll move on to the next unit change. That would be the Dothraki Screamers. So these guys, they got a minor change word-wise, but a massive change impact-wise. Do you want to talk about how a one word can change an entire unit's fortune, Dennis?
Yeah, I guess when the update came out and they revealed Sundering as an addition to their keywords, the whole Targaryen community was reveling in that because a lot of people were calling for it. Also because the faction is lacking ways to have sundering. So there's different ideas on how to get sundering into Targaryens. And now one of the staple units, the bread and butter kind of unit for a Dothraki army, the Screamers, gets it, and they're in the starter box. So the starter box, just because of that one keyword, became so good. Now you can use that to make really competitive lists. And I think that highlights the impact this one keyword has. They are maneuverable. They put out a vulnerable token when they charge you. And now they have 7 die on 3+ with Sundering, and that makes a huge difference on that one charge with rerolls. That is a great, a big attack, especially if they can use the mobility to get into a flank. So this is really huge. And Screamers are have not been picked before for the 6 points because they were too squishy. And since they are such a squishy unit with a lot of Targaryen units, you need to double tap and kill something. If you need 3 attacks to kill something, that's 1 attack too much, and you're probably either crippled or you're dead.
Yeah.
So this really helps them to get this double tap kill.
Yeah, and for me, until this update, the only time I was really seeing screamers on the table was when I was playing like a new player who had just bought the starter box, pretty much, and people just weren't really running them. And even at 6 points, when I would build Targ lists with Cavalry, if I needed another Cav unit at 6 points, I would just bring a Zor's Rider, which feels sad to not bring a Screamer in a Targaryen army. So I think this is huge. Also, the loss of Flayed Men really kind of impacted Targaryen cavalry list too. Flayed Men were at as an 8-point unit, just aren't brought as often anymore in Targ lists. So now you have a Dothraki Screamer unit that can compete with Flayed Men for damage output. And then at 6 points, you can spend another 1 point to even turn these guys up to, a even bigger killing machine. You throw a Screamer Co in there, give them martial training. You can do, if you want to increase their survivability, put an Outrider Co in there, give them disrupt. So these guys, I think this was one of the biggest changes for the faction, I think, in this update.
Yeah, definitely.
Very, very happy for it. I'm just sad that I'm sad that the Screamers were so poor for so long that I don't have any of them painted. So if I start running them, I'm going to have some unpainted plastic and otherwise mostly painted Targaryen army. So I need to get on that now.
I'm sure you'll do fine. I've seen the rest of your army. I'm sure you'll do fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Yeah, I agree.
So now,
you said.
Yeah. So moving from good changes to bad changes, we can talk a little bit about Solo Jorah, or as he's known around my house, Simp Daddy Supreme Jorah. So he's gone. The biggest thing, he's gone from 3 to 4 points. So he's been made harder to kill from a panic test. So his morale went from it was a 4+ now to a 3+, which just seems really weird. He's somewhere between like a beast and a dragon or something, or somewhere between a Unsullied and a dragon. It's just weird. And then his attack dice went from 2 to 3, but his points went up by 1. So he's definitely not getting the cold hands treatment here. I think this was, like I said earlier, just a straight up assassination. Jorah just got totally done dirty here. So I don't know. There's not too much to say. I just think he's not going to be taken very much anymore. We'll talk about Outriders really quickly, but I think the synergy he had with Outriders is no longer, because Outriders now benefit from what he could have done for them, for the most part. I don't know. I'm just a little sad. I have to pour one out, for poor Jorah, but he's not, he's gone but not forgotten. We'll see him as an attachment now. He just won't be riding around on his horse. But what do you think, Dennis? What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree. He was a staple in all the Targaryens list because he was just so good for 3 points, and so flexible. You could put him on an objective for 3 points. He had great synergy with Outriders, as you said, but also with veterans. Since veterans can shoot twice or shoot and charge in 1 turn. And his order scout openings gives a unit or targets the enemy that's being attacked, and gives the unit attacking rerolls and precision. This was huge for veterans, obviously, as a combo and synergy. And I think this assassination, as you call it, that has some collateral damage, which are the veterans now, because they're still good, but for their points cost, you can just take Screamers and still have 2 points left.
Yeah.
Since they have Sundering, they have probably have similar output. I'm not saying veterans cannot be taken, but to really use them well for their point cost, you also needed Jorah. And now if you take him, you're at 12, like a 12-point combo that you have on the battlefield that can be killed. And the big problem now for Jorah with 4 points, not just his point cost got up, but he's also a liability. His morale went up, as you said, but there are in the current meta, Varys as an NCU is very present in a lot of lists, and he can cause like if you take swords, he will cause hits to a unit, and those hits with the panic test can easily one-shot Jorah. So you'll have that stuff. You have Night's Watch artillery popping up this season that can kill him from across the battlefield. And he, if he gets taken out and you have veterans, then those veterans are not worth 8 points anymore, and you lose an activation. And if you're playing against a Night's Watch list that might have happened from across the board in first round. So he's a liability and it cannot be taken in a competitive list, I think.
Yeah. And then soon we're gonna have giant spear throwers who can yeet a spear from the deployment zone and kill Jorah that way. Like you said, I think his biggest threat now is probably Varys, because he's what is he, a 4+ armor save, I think, which has never felt good. That's always kept him out of melee, or I mean, for most people it keeps him out of melee. I think I find myself throwing him into melee just for laughs when I've already know that all hope is lost for me. I usually try to have him have a heroic moment, and usually completely disappoints me. But yeah, Varys, if he takes a couple of Varys tokens, he's probably dead. I mean, he's got 3 wounds. If he takes, I mean, he could take one Varys token, and one out of 4 of Varys's tokens could potentially kill a 4-point unit, which, like you said, could be a critical piece of whatever your offensive strategy was. If he was there for, like you said, with your veterans, now your veterans are neutered, or if he was going to be an objective holder, now he's dead. So yeah, I say rest in peace, Solo Jorah. We'll see you off of your horse in another form.
Exactly. I have to say though, at first when the update dropped, I wasn't totally disappointed, because I myself felt limited in the list building, because every list I built, I always ended up taking him for those 3 points. So yeah, it's sad, and I think it is also impactful in a negative way for Targaryens competitively, because Jorah was, like, often people said that the whole faction is propped up by Jorah solo. Might be an exaggeration, and now we have more options. But I think it's still a bit of a negative impact for the faction, but it opened up a lot of new list building options, and I like that. After all's been said,
Yeah, that's true. And he can be now taken as a commander. So now Dothraki Screamers are better, and Jorah Commander is a cavalry focused commander. So you could see his death as a solo could be his resurrection as a cav commander. So so that's one potential positive. So it's sad to see him go. Yeah.
Good commander.
I mean, yes, Jorah cav commander can be fun and interesting. So it's not all bad. It's fun new list building possibilities. So it's not all bad. And we have 2 more units to really quickly go over. There was the Dothraki Outriders, who received precision as a part of their long range offensive package. So now not only do they hit on a 3+, and they hit on a 3+, but they'll get precision as well. So I think I'm not a fan of precision everywhere. I do not like that everything is getting precision now, but at least with these guys now, you don't need to have Jorah with them. I use Jorah a lot with the Outriders to give them precision. So now you don't need to have Jorah there to get precision. But I don't think this fundamentally changes if you bring Outriders or how you use Outriders. It's just a buff to them. What do you think, Dennis? Do you have any other thoughts on these?
Yeah, I agree. I've used them like twice or so after the update, and I think exactly what you're saying, that you don't use them differently. Precision is a cool keyword, especially for ranged units that are safe and won't be hit back. And with Outriders, you can pop off a few ranged attacks in the game. You will be able to shoot at least twice or 3 times or 4 times. So it's cool to have those, but still, precision is a luck-based keyword. If you don't roll those 6s, it's not gonna help. And since you don't have the rerolls anymore, those 6s are less likely. So I think it's a straight buff for them as a unit. But as you said, it doesn't change them that much. However, I do think the threat they pose just by having the keyword and potentially you rolling 4 6s and causing 4 auto wounds so taking a rank off of an infantry unit. I think alone that threat is helpful for a list.
Yeah, and it helps also if you're facing giants or something with resilience, or you're facing a Baratheon list with heavy armor. So Targaryens struggle with armor, so this is another way for them to be able to punch through armor.
Yeah.
And then last and certainly least is the Stormcrow Dervish change. So they went from a 7-up morale to a 6-up morale, and nobody cares, and they're still not going to be taken, I don't think.
Yeah, agree. Just no synergy with tactics deck or other units. You just don't take them. They're a cool unit.
Yeah. All right, so now we're going to move on to NCUs, and we're going to start off with Piat Pre. So I think we're in agreement. He's probably the most impactful change on the NCU side. So he went from an NCU that you would only take really just so you could have a 6th tactic zone. That's really the only reason you would take him before, to now you take him for that, and because he actually has an interesting ability. So now he has a zone replace to make your opponent reveal all tactics cards in their hand, and then they have to discard 1 at random from their hand, which, like, when I'm visualizing it like Piat Pre is kind of like patting down your opponent and then like picking their pocket. You're like pulling their pockets out and seeing what they've got in their hand, and then just making them throw something away, which I think is cool. It is a zone replace, and we are a faction that has Illyrio also already replacing a zone. So it is a tough sell to have 2 zone replace NCUs, which means you're not going to be taking the effect of the wealth zone or the combat zone. And then his once per game ability is also pretty interesting, that he can replace the House of the Undying effect with returning a tactics card from your discard pile to your hand. So there are some powerful combinations there in the Targaryen faction with cards like Marcelin's Devotees of the Dragon or Mother of Dragons, Fire Made Flesh. So I think it's an interesting change for me. It's something I definitely would want to play around with a bit. But I think it's going to be kind of list dependent. It's definitely not a must take on every list. I think it's going to definitely be dependent on the list. What do you think, Dennis? What are your thoughts on Piat Pre?
Yeah, when the update dropped, people were saying, "Wow, that's huge. That's a huge change." Knowing the opponent's tactics deck can be so valuable. Having that intel, especially against factions that rely on a very good tactics deck, like Lannisters, maybe Baratheons with a Final Strike. If you know that these cards, Counterplot, Final Strike, are in the hand, you're going to play that round differently. Plus, you have the ability with Piat to throw off one of those cards. So if you would play him at the start of a round, probably, while your opponent still has those 3 cards. And then you have a 1 in 3 chance, or if they have 5 cards, less of that chance to maybe pull out one of the good ones. So that's
Mhm.
good intel, and it's nice to be able to maybe throw it out. But there's a but, I think. I guess like a few weeks or now we're a few months after the update, becomes clear that it's a really cool change for Pyatt, because as you said, he's never been used before. But when you get into round 3, things are getting hectic and serious on the battlefield, and you need those tactic zones. You need the swords. You need the bags, as you said. You're hard pressed to make a zone replace on those. So I think he and his abilities are strongest only in first and second round, probably.
Yeah.
But still, it's cool. I really like the extra tactic zone in Targaryens. Not all factions have that. And I think it sometimes confuses or surprises some players, maybe not on a competitive level, of course. But I think it's super fun to have that extra zone, because I feel like a lot of times I take that zone in first and second round and the opponent doesn't. And if they pick one of my base tactic cards from Targaryens, I'm not super disappointed, because I was going to throw half of those away anyways.
Right.
Of course, if you're playing Drogo and they pull out an assault orders, that's kind of meh. But all in all, I think I really like the change to him. I think, again, it opens up new options with using the House of the Undying, because that's something special for only a handful of factions. And yeah, I think his once per game ability, in addition to all that, makes him really worth the 4 points.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think we'll see him a lot more. It'll be interesting to see what kind of combos and list people can put together with him.
Yeah.
There were 2 other NCU changes we can go through quickly. Hizdar Zolorak, his points went down from 5 to 4. I think you see a little bit more in him than I do. Dennis, do you want to talk about what your thoughts are on him, and what kind of lists you would take him in now, or what you think about this NCU in general?
Yeah, sure. So the point reductions are always a big impact on units and NCUs. And now Hizdar, I think, is really worth the 4 points and can be put into interesting lists. He has good synergy with other NCUs, like Pyatt, we just talked about, obviously. If you have those 2 in your list, if you somehow manage to do that and get to find a way to not pick the other strong NCUs that we have and end up with these 2, you can pull out a lot of cards from your opponent's tactics deck in first and second round. So I think that synergy is, if nothing else, interesting and fun to do. Maybe not for your opponent, but who cares? So that's cool. And Zaro has been changed. He still has the same effects, but now you get more effects because it's before it was the zone that he controls determined which effects would happen on his influence. Now it's the zones that you as a player control. So if you pop his influence late in the round, or at least when the tactics deck is the tactics board is full, then there's a good chance you get 2 effects out of that.
Yeah.
I think all of these changes, maybe as you already hinted, including Pyatt, but definitely Hizdar and Zaro, their issue is they're overshadowed by some of the other strong and more or less must-take NCUs. Like you mentioned, Illyrio is so good for Targaryens and so helpful in every situation that you would take him. We talked about Varys before. So Varys does a lot of cool things for Targaryens. We want mobility. He can give us mobility through the horse zone. We need to make wounds. and kill, so he's good for that as well. And I think, if you have that, or maybe Kaith, or you have a list where you need Miss Sunday because you need a tactics card, definitely. So there's so much pressure on these NCUs or on your list building for NCUs, that I think they're in the shadow of these really strong and variable NCUs.
Yeah, well said. I think there's Illyrio is almost 100% a must-have, and then in this meta, I think Varys is a real easy second pick, which leaves you with one other NCU, and it's a very, I think that's maybe where you could see Piat going in with the right list, or like kind of another utility NCU that suits your list.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a difficult or a real skew kind of list where you see 2 or 3 of these updated NCUs squeezing in. Like if you really want to go full like mill jank list with Hisdar and Piat, you could do that, or
Yeah.
the whole gang of the 3 of them in a list and just be super janky. But yeah, we as Targaryens, we are kind of set in a little bit which NCUs we can take. So it's a very competitive field.
Yeah. Well, definitely he again opens up, or this trio opens up some new list building ideas, even if it's not top competitive. And I don't know. Yeah, we'll see how that develops. At least you can play some fun mill list, as you said. You could even put Walder in there, maybe have Hisdar and Wyatt and Walder Frey, and then at the end of the round you can pick whatever you want. If you need a heal, you heal. So you kind of alleviate the problem that you're not taking Illyrio a little bit with Walder, and you guarantee that he can take a zone as long as your opponent doesn't take 4 NCUs. So yeah.
All right. Well, now we'll move on to tactics cards. It's our last segment. There were a couple of base tactics cards that were changed that we'll talk about briefly. Fire and Blood was changed. This was kind of in the same vein as there's like a universal change that has happened throughout the game on timing changes. So Fire and Blood used to be used before you rolled charge distance dice, which if you failed the charge, then the card was just a complete waste. So you no longer waste the card anymore because you play it after the charge distance die has been rolled. So that's a good change. I don't think there's too much we need to say about it. It's a buffed. It's buffed. It's better. You can now be guaranteed to actually benefit from it.
Yeah, and it makes super sense. I mean, it probably should have been like that from the get-go.
Yeah. And then Unstoppable Advance was changed. I will say on the record, for the record, let the record reflect, I do not like this change. I was always a big fan of Unstoppable Advance, not necessarily because its ability was super strong, but just because it was like a kind of cinematic card to play to just crash through obstacles, and I always had fun with it. So I'm a little annoyed that it's now gone to just weakening, like an AoE weaken effect. And I think it would have been better if it didn't just trigger off of a march. So now you march and then weaken everything around you. I think it would be better if it was triggered off of a maneuver. Even though I know Unstoppable Advance sounds like a long advance or like a long march, but I think it would be more effective if it could trigger off of a maneuver. Like you're playing a cav list, you maneuver around some opponents, and then you drop it, you weaken everything, and then you charge in. So I'm a little sad about Unstoppable Advance, but hopefully I'll be proven wrong and people will find a lot of value in this change. But what do you think, Dennis? Do you like the new Unstoppable Advance better than the old one? It is more token gen, at least.
That's true, and I like token generation as much as I can get. But I totally agree with you. I don't think it was a good change. To be honest, I like having this in the Targaryen tactics deck, but just make it a completely new tactics card and replace one of the less less helpful, which we have quite a lot of, so just take one. Yeah, and make this another tactics card, maybe.
All right, well, let's move on to some commanders. So probably the most substantial change commander-wise for tactics cards was Dany, Queen of Marine. And while it's substantial, somewhat substantial changes, they're not very creative changes. So Dany, Queen of Marine, she had 3 of her tactics cards changed. Targ Supremacy, Counterplot, Subjugation of Power. And these are really just in line with the updates that have been made to Lannisters. So like Counterplot, it's identical to Lannister Counterplot, except instead of depending on crown and bag, it's crown and swords. Same thing for Subjugation of Power. It was changed alongside the Lannister version, and it's based off of swords and crown. I will say Subjugation of Power is, I think, kind of better suited it's really well suited for Queen of Marine because she is a very panic focused commander, and Subjugation of Power now triggers a panic test rather than a morale test. So I do think this buffs her a bit, having a ability to trigger a panic test off of a card. And we talked about her earlier getting threatened. So I think Queen of Marine is one of the commanders that benefits most from this update. And yeah, she got buffed. You know, these cards were buffed. But well, like we talked about in the Lannister video, you could argue a little bit on the mathematics of whether Counterplot actually was buffed or not. But I do like the changes that were made to these tactics cards. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I guess since you've talked about it in the Lannister video already, there's no need to really go deep into it. And I think it doesn't make Queen of Marine really, it doesn't let her play differently that much. You still want to do the same things that you did before. So yeah, I think it's fine.
I think the other commander changes were not huge, so we can just run really quickly through them. So Barristan had Sustained Assault change, which was a universal change. All versions of Sustained Assault got a similar change. So this one used to give rerolls. Now it gives a vulnerable token if it's Barristan's unit. So I think this maybe increases his stock a little bit, especially in light of Targaryens having Unsullied swords that already have rerolls, and Golden Company swords that have rerolls. So this was a buff for him, I think, in that part of this card's value was kind of useless before for him, the rerolls. So I think that's kind of good for him. But you know, so what? It's good, but not going to change how often he's taken, I don't think.
No.
Yeah. What do you think?
It's not an impactful change.
A couple other commanders that got changed, but that weren't really even worth spending much time on. Mother of Dragons, a couple of the cards changed to just add in the draw like on started friendly turn draw tactics cards. So it's the same thing that other commander specific cards, like cards that require the commander's unit. You know, if that commander is dead, now it gives you you can draw a tactics card. Okay, like big deal. Then Marcelin, Devastating Impact changed, but that was a universal change. We've talked about it before in Starks. And then Warcry, his card changed there. Again, that's a universal change. So if his card, if you play Warcry off of him, then you can place both tokens. Again, not a huge change, small buff. And then finally there was Belwas. You know, he's Belwas the Strong, but he's really Belwas the Sad because nobody ever plays him. And a couple of his cards were changed, Pathetic Attempt and Count the Cuts, but I don't think the changes were really significant enough to change him being brought in lists. I mean, we talked earlier about Taunt being changed, but Harden got nerfed in the previous patch, so you don't even want to really bring him, for Hardened anymore because Hardened got nerfed. Yeah, I mean, Targaryens already have a few pretty strong commander picks. I think more than anything, everybody knows Targs just need like a total rework of their base tactics cards. So they, this, I don't think the scope of this update wasn't to go dig into Targaryen's tactics cards. The main overhaul was to Greyjoys, which we'll talk about in a future video. So hopefully in a future patch they'll get a lot more attention. But until then, we're not feeling great. But there's some good changes. It's still a fun faction. I still love playing them, and I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna have fun playing them in season 3. You have any final thoughts, Dennis, before we call it here and sign off?
No, I agree. I really like them. Their mobility is great. We had we as a faction took second place in US Nationals. Venus did an amazing job. Impressive play there, and just shows, even with a faction that's not as high ranked, anything's possible. And it showed that Targaryen mobility can really be strong, and I think that's what we have and what we need to use.
Yeah, well said. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to the player and to their play on the day. We've seen before factions that were rated low in kind of stats and general opinion, end up placing highly at big tournaments. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for Targs.
Yeah.
Well, with that, thanks a lot for joining us, Dennis, on this video. It was great having this conversation with you. And I hope everybody will stay tuned to our next video, which is going to be focused on the Baratheon faction. That'll be video number 7. That'll be coming out probably the week after this video releases. And until then, this is Randall.
And Dennis.
Signing off.
Signing off.